This is the original podcast edition of The Guild of the Cowry Catchers by Abigail Hilton, now part of the complete Pirates of Wefravain series. The books are available as audiobooks, ebooks, and paperbacks. This podcast originally aired from 2010 to 2014. Stick around after the story for commentary from me, the author, more than a decade later. The Guild of the Cowry Catchers, a novel of pirates and Panamindorah. Written and narrated by Abigail Hilton. Book 1. Embers. Warning: this novel was intended for people who shop in the grown-up section of the bookstore. It is not intended for children or young teens. If you need to ask whether you will be offended, you probably will. Episode 5.
Hi, I'm Big Anklovich.
And I'm Rish Outfield.
And that's 080T.
And I'm Announcer Man.
Okay, come on, you guys don't need to be here. Just get lost already.
We're the hosts of the Dunesteef audio fiction magazine, a podcast that brings you sci-fi, fantasy, and horror stories.
And scintillating,
long-winded
conversation after the story about any number of geek-related subjects.
Check it out at www.dunesteef.com.
Big, since I got you here, I've always wondered where the name Dunesteef comes from.
Oh, that's a funny story. Once I was at a Chinese restaurant and I got my fortune cookie, and aside from the lucky numbers, the only thing on the paper was that one word, Dunesteef.
Did you ask anybody about it?
I couldn't. The Chinese restaurant burned to the ground that very night. But I've led a charmed life ever since.
Oh.
Okay, so, the story so far. Gerard...
Is this a kissing book?
Someday you might not mind so much. So, Gerard is ostracized aboard the Fang. On the journey to CERN, Silvio has clearly given orders that no one speak to him.
However, late one evening, he meets Silvio on the quarterdeck, and they have a brief conversation. Silvio clawed his way to his position from a childhood of poverty and abuse, and it becomes clear that he sees Gerard as a threat to his position.
He tells Gerard to forswear Thessalin and go home, or Silvio will see him killed. When they arrive on CERN, they find the warehouse described by the smuggler. It's full of strangely modified, but otherwise unremarkable grape presses.
Gerard's griffin, Alcer, spots some shelts fleeing out the back, but they escape. Silvio does not like griffins and is getting along with Alcer even more poorly than with Gerard. Discouraged, Gerard starts back to the ship alone, through the shanty town near the docks.
On an impulse, he steps into an Ocelon tea house.
Chapter 13. Tea with Flag.
The Grishnard written language is an ancient and cumbersome pictographic text. Each word is a little picture with no clues to pronunciation. It requires years to learn to read and write these characters with any skill, and they serve to perpetuate Wefravain's rigid class system. Shelts without the means to begin early training in the written word are hopelessly outmatched by Shelts who've been trained from childhood. Oddly enough, phonetic characters have been known in the island for ages. They can be taught in a day to a willing Shelt and would greatly increase efficiency in almost every area of business and learning. However, the beauty cult of the Wyverns dismissed phonetic characters long ago as barbaric, crude, and ugly, the worst sin. The Wyverns and their priestess may indeed find the phonetic characters ugly, but I believe that they also find them dangerous. The class system is to their advantage. They do not want a reading public. Gwaine, The Truth About Wyverns.
The tent was a tea house. Gerard could smell the tea as soon as he entered, but the interior was so dark that he could see nothing for a moment. He stood there, his head brushing the top of the low roof, fighting a sense of claustrophobia. Gerard took a step inside, and something dangled in his face, tickling his nose and making him sneeze. Gradually he became accustomed to the gloom, and saw that the tent had been constructed of raw pelts, fur side inward. They made a crazy pattern of spots and stripes. A number of the pelts had the feet or faces of animals still attached to them, and a couple of paws were dangling in Gerard's face. In addition to the pelts, the owner of the tea house had, unaccountably, sewn random bits of ribbon, bone, and feathers into the walls. The whole effect was a bewildering array of colors and textures. Gerard glanced over the tables. There were only 4, each large enough for 2 or 3 shelves. A leather curtain partitioned the back of the room, which must be the kitchen. The place was lit by 2 censers, which gave off a pleasant odor. A lone Ocelon sat at one of the tables, with a book and a cup of tea. He was wearing pants and boots, and had a few facial stripes. His hair was light brown. Gerard wondered if he might be a sailor, as his pants appeared to be made from sailcloth. Gerard sat down across from him. The Ocelon's eyes lifted slowly from his book, hazel in the muddy light. Gerard was surprised. The Ocelon was wearing little wire-framed lenses. Eye lenses were rare in Wefravain, although Gerard had seen them a couple of times before. They were expensive and difficult to make. Most of the Shelts who could afford them didn't need them. Grishnards had legendarily good eyesight. And Shelts who might need them couldn't afford them.
Where did you get those?
Gerard had intended nothing but honest curiosity. However, the Ocelon took off his lenses and slid them across the table. Gerard felt ashamed.
Have these Shelts been so trodden upon that they immediately roll over every time a Grishnard points at them?
Gerard forced himself to pick up the lenses and examine them. The frames were only cheap wire, but the glass itself was good work. He set them back down on the table in front of the Ocelon.
I wasn't accusing you of theft. I was only curious.
The Ocelon quirked a smile. He put his lenses back on.
You must be Gerard Holivar. Welcome to CERN, Captain.
Gerard tried to cover his surprise.
Am I already so famous?
You have something of a reputation, yes. And you're hard to miss.
Gerard sat back. It was true that his height set him apart in a crowd, but usually only to Shelts who'd met him before.
Do I know you from somewhere?
The Ocelon shrugged.
I was on Holivaris once, just a ship's clerk. I doubt you remember me.
Gerard didn't, but he would not make the mistake again.
Can you read?
He asked with real interest. For answer, the Ocelon showed him the book in his hand.
Not only read,
thought Gerard with a jolt.
Write.
The book was a blank of vellum sheets, produced for scribes who copied manuscripts. Gerard spied an inkwell and pen at the Ocelon's elbow. A moment later, his surprise turned to puzzlement. The characters on the page were not Grishnard. They were the strange, spidery script of the Ocelons.
It's just the phonetic,
said the Ocelon, as Gerard examined the book.
Bookkeeping for a merchant vessel.
The owner of the tea house appeared at that moment and asked Gerard what he wanted. She spoke haltingly, with downcast eyes. Gerard was still looking at the book.
Whatever he's having.
He stared at the dense lines of script. They didn't look like any bookkeeping he had ever seen, but then he had no experience with the phonetic. He returned the book.
Do you read and write Grishnard also?
Not as well, but yes, I can.
And other languages? Hunti, Mountain Grishnard, Majan.
The Ocelon smiled, his lenses flashing in the censor's light.
I speak a little of everything.
Gerard drew a deep breath. As far as he knew, what he was about to suggest had never been done before.
Still, the priestess has a foxling leading her watch. I don't see why she should object to an Ocelon in the police. Would you like a job?
The Ocelon nearly choked on his tea. Gerard took a moment to realize he was laughing.
Forgive me. I was only thinking of what my master would say. I have debts I cannot abandon, but thank you for your offer. I realize it's a high compliment.
The mistress of the tea house had brought Gerard's drink. She passed it to the Ocelon, who handed it to Gerard.
I could arrange for payment of your debts.
Gerard persisted.
I'm in need of a Shelt who speaks Magian.
I'm sure you are.
Said the Ocelon, gathering his supplies into a bag.
But I'm not the one to help you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must go.
At least tell me your name and the name of your ship.
The Ocelon hesitated in the doorway.
Flag. And my ship is the Defiance. Goodbye, Captain.
Gerard frowned. Defiance was a strange name for a merchant ship. Something was tickling at the back of his brain. Almost, he got up and went after the Ocelon, but he couldn't think of a way to detain him except by force. He didn't have a good reason, just a gut-level sense of wrongness. At that moment he remembered Montpierre's list.
Teacups. Tea leaves?
Gerard glanced down at his cup. It was ordinary clay. He reached across the table and picked up Flag's empty cup, but the sodden leaves told him nothing. He sniffed them, then sniffed his own cup.
I thought I told her to give us the same kind of tea.
He was fairly certain that the teas were not, in fact, identical, but he couldn't be sure. Griffins and Grishnards did not possess a keen sense of smell, a trait they shared with fawns. However, other Panons did have extraordinary noses, including foxlings. On an impulse, Gerard tipped out his tea onto the dirt floor, keeping the leaves. As he did so, he noticed something under the Ocelon's chair and picked it up. A scrap of downy, blue-gray feather.
It could have come from anywhere, but...
Gerard stood up all at once. He picked up both the teacups and put one in each pocket. The owner was still nowhere in sight, so he deposited several cowries on the table, more than enough to pay for both his tea and the cups, and ducked out of the tent. He had not gone far when he ran into Silvio's party returning from the warehouse. Gerard fell in with them.
His eyes,
he realized suddenly.
I don't think they were slitted. I was so busy looking at his lenses that I didn't notice.
Of course, the tea house had been dim, and many Shelt's eyes would have been dilated. Even a slit-eyed Shelt's pupil might look round in that light, but Gerard thought he was right. He picked up his pace and reached the front of the group.
Silvio, are these teas different?
Silvio leapt back as though Gerard had tried to hand him a live snake. In his excitement, Gerard realized he'd been overfamiliar. He was also asking Silvio to do, in public, something that set him apart as a non-Grishnard. It might make him angry, but at that moment Gerard didn't care.
Teacups,
he said impatiently, waving them in the air.
Different, yes or no? It's important.
For a moment, Gerard thought Silvio would refuse, might even spit in his face. Then Silvio took the teacups, moving with deliberate slowness.
Has anyone ever introduced you to the concept of verbal communication, Holivar? Sentences, perhaps?
Gerard was thinking again.
The face spots could have been paint or coal, and he was wearing boots.
Normally only Panons wore boots. They were unnecessary and uncomfortable for fawns, but a fawn wishing to disguise himself as a Panon could construct padded and reinforced boots.
Did he have a tail?
Gerard couldn't remember seeing one. Of course, long-tailed Shelts sometimes tuck their tails into their pants to keep them out of the way, and a tail could be amputated in an accident. Picturing the Shelt standing up made Gerard think of something else.
His height.
Flag had been tall for an Ocelon, but he was about the right height for a Chevier fawn. Silvio broke into his thoughts.
You could say they're different, yes. Did you actually drink any of this, Holivar?
He was holding out Gerard's cup.
No.
Silvio clicked his tongue.
Huh, a pity. It's poisoned.
Gerard started to laugh. Silvio raised an eyebrow.
I had no idea you would find the idea so entertaining. This is really crude work. I can do much better. Priestess knows I've exercised self-restraint in the matter of food.
Gerard hardly heard him.
I think I just met Gwaine.
Chapter 14. Flirtation and Chocolate.
In many cases, minstrels are essentially the priestesses of the courts they serve. However, a few minstrels choose to dig deeper than their basic training. Their school houses the oldest library in Wefravain. Some of the old ballads and epics contain kernels of truth that make our high priestess and her dragons uneasy. Gawain, The Truth About Wyverns.
Silvio stopped his banter at once.
You met whom?
Gawain,
Gerard started to walk away.
in a tea house.
Silvio had to trot to keep up.
Which tea house? Where?
You know who Gawain is?
Of course I know who he is. He's a nuisance. I'd love to carpet my library with his pelt.
Arundel doesn't seem to think he's a real person.
Arundel doesn't think anyone but himself is a real person,
retorted Silvio, and then he seemed to remember who he was talking to and that his command was listening.
Holivar, I demand that you stop and explain yourself. That's an order. Then you're going to lead us to this tea house.
Gerard stopped walking. He realized, belatedly, that the price of Silvio's help was Silvio's interference.
Listen, they think they've poisoned me. They don't know that I know. Let's not kick a hornet's nest yet. I think we can learn a little more.
What you'll learn is that the whole arrangement is up and gone by tomorrow. You don't poison a captain of police and then stay in town to see what happens.
Silvio's eyes lit up.
We could burn Ocelon Town for this. It's been a nest of resistance traitors for ages. This would give us the perfect excuse. The Magister will whine about it, but the king won't care.
Burn it?
Gerard thought of the children staring up at him shyly from their jumping game scrawled in the dirt. He took a deep breath.
So we'll make enemies of every Ocelon in Wefravain? They'll hate us and they'll never help us.
They already hate us. Besides, not many will survive the fire to hold grudges. If you think you can make friends out of them, you're dumber than I thought.
They were about to have a full-blown argument, and Gerard had the sinking feeling he would lose. The sailors with Silvio had backed off to a respectful distance. Gerard understood their nervousness. When superiors fought, the loser often took out his frustration on the nearest subordinate. However, before either of them could say another word, a messenger came running up the street. He bowed.
Magister Alfred said that he is honored at the presence of both the Temple Sea Watch and the police on his island.
Honored,
muttered Silvio.
More like scared witless.
And he would like to invite sirs to dinner at his estate. He also begs me to tell the captain of the police that his wife is here to see him.
Gerard's breath caught in his throat.
Tess is here?
The messenger kept his eyes downcast.
She said that you would not be pleased. She asked me to tell you that she is blind, not crippled.
Silvio started to laugh.
I like her already.
Gerard shot him a look.
If you come anywhere near her, I will break you in half.
Would sirs come with me now?
Yes, lead the way.
The Magister's estate was a lavishly manicured garden fortress at the top of a hill. They were met halfway there by a winged carriage drawn by 4 purple and gold Pegasus, their feathered manes twined with flowers. The carriage had foldable, kite-like wings attached to its sides and a balloon of light gas attached to the rear. It was constructed to skim along above the rooftops when the wings were opened. The market area at the city center provided space for takeoff. Farrell and several of his captains from the ship met them there, brought by messenger. Silvio sent the rest of the sailors back to the ship with permission to take the evening off and enjoy themselves. Gerard thought of Alcere. The Griffin would have been entirely at home in such an environment, and Gerard wished that he had not sent him away. They had a pleasant ride over the rooftops with the wind in their faces, and arrived at last at the hilltop estate amid sprawling trees and rich archways of flowering vines. Nothing could seem further from Slag Harbor or the squalor of Ocelon Town. But Gerard noticed that most of the retainers were Ocelons. They looked better fed than those in the streets, immaculate in white and gold livery that accentuated their exotic stripes and brilliant eyes. They padded around the estate, bootless on their spotted paws, quiet as shadows and ornamental as flowers. The light had almost faded when they arrived. Torches had been lit in the garden. Gerard heard harp music coming from the pavilion at the center and strode towards it.
Thus?
The music stopped at once, and she came tripping down the steps as light-footed as a gazumel. She ran into his arms.
Gerard,
He hugged her hard.
Tess,
His voice almost broke.
you cannot follow me around. How did you get here?
She laid her head against his chest.
An airship. We had a favorable wind. I've sailed that route before.
During her touring days as a minstrel student, Thessalin had been all over Wefravain. She'd traveled more than Gerard.
You seemed so unhappy about coming. I thought I'd beat you here and surprise you.
You did?
He wanted to lecture her, but it felt so good to have her in his arms. Marlowe Snail came slinking out of the pavilion.
Sir, I tried to stop her.
Gerard shook his head.
I understand.
There was nothing to do but come with her.
Thank you for that.
I am sorry, sir.
It's all right,
Said Gerard, although it wasn't.
but there's nothing Marlowe could have done. If I can't keep Cess from walking in harm's way, he certainly won't be able to.
He remembered a time he'd found her strolling along the beach on Halivaris, how he'd chided her about tides and pirates and wild animals, and she'd just kept talking about shells and ballads and the smell of the ocean. The trouble was that she'd never been able to see. A Shelt who'd gone blind later in life would know the world as it was, would fear their vulnerability in it. But Thessalin knew only the world as she perceived it, the world in her mind. Gerard had never been able to convince her that it was a deeply dangerous place.
They have giant butterworth flowers here.
Continued Thessalin.
They're very interesting. They eat insects. They don't grow anywhere else. Come and see.
She used that word blithely, knowing that for her it meant to touch, and for him it meant something else.
Cess,
Gerard took her by the shoulders.
listen to me. You really can't follow me around Wefravain. It is dangerous. Please.
She frowned and brought out her practical voice.
You don't really expect me to sit at home and worry about you like a sailor's wife. I am a professional wanderer. You can't take that away from me, Gerard.
Gerard bowed his head. There was the trouble. Thessalin could sing her way to almost any place in the islands. Shelts would not charge her a cowry, and they would thank her for coming. Normally her blindness would not put her in much danger, not in the company that would patronize her talents. The title of minstrel gave her a degree of protection as well, especially to the devout or those who simply feared the gods.
Yes,
He said carefully.
but I am making enemies.
Someone cleared his throat, and Gerard turned to see Silvio standing at his elbow.
What he's trying to say, in his inarticulate fashion, is that the world is not a safe place because there are Shelts like me in it.
Gerard glared down at him. Silvio kept looking at Thessalin.
He's right about that. However, when it comes to me, he worries needlessly. I would not harm someone so lovely, or at least I'd need a better reason than Holivar.
Thessalin smiled.
Silvio Lemire?
For better or for worse.
She crouched down so that she was on eye level with him. Gerard's fingers curled around the hilt of his sword, but Silvio ignored him. Thessalin put a hand out and went over Silvio's face lightly with her fingertips, her way of seeing someone. Silvio didn't flinch, even when her fingers danced around his eyes. Thessalin giggled.
As Gerard says, too much coal.
Silvio grinned.
Is that all he says?
No.
I didn't think so.
Her fingers whisked over his hat and earrings.
You love pretty things, don't you?
To a fault, as I'm sure your husband has commented upon.
Thessalin smiled in the way that she did when she was about to say something funny, so that her whole face crinkled up.
I think Gerard is pretty.
Gerard rolled his eyes. Silvio seemed momentarily startled, then barked a laugh. He kept laughing helplessly for several seconds, then wiped a tear from his eye.
Lady, you have rendered me completely without comment, and that's not an easy thing to do.
Please be nice to my husband, Admiral.
I have already told your husband what he needs to do to procure my goodwill, although I see now why he doesn't want to do it.
Silvio reached into his pocket, and Gerard reached for his sword again. Silvio glanced at him, and then very deliberately brought out a little tin. It turned out to contain some kind of candy. He took out a piece and bit it in half.
Now, your husband will note that I have eaten part of this to demonstrate its lack of poison.
He handed the other half to Thessalin.
It comes from the lawless lands, and they sell it sometimes on Cern. I believe it's called chocolate.
Thessalin put the candy in her mouth and chewed for a moment. She shut her eyes in an expression of bliss. Silvio handed her the tin.
If Halavar wishes, I will bite them all in half. Or he can. Otherwise, they're yours. Have a lovely time on Cern, lady.
Gerard watched him go, frowning. Flirtation was the last thing he'd expected when Silvio crossed paths with Thessalin.
But I really don't think you would hurt her.
The idea filled him with immense relief. Thessalin interrupted his thoughts.
Is he gone?
Yes. Well, he's across the courtyard.
Is he always like that?
Gerard snorted.
That was as gentle as I've ever seen him.
He's not all bad.
No, only mostly.
She hugged him again.
Are you less afraid for me now?
Yes.
Then let's dance. I want to dance.
She could dance very well, provided her partner made certain they didn't run into anyone. Several other musicians had begun to play in the pavilion, and they went round and round in the twilight, with the torches burning and the fireflies glowing over the grass. Chapter 15. More Talking.
Cartographers disagree over whether the lawless lands are an island, or whether they are a large landmass like the Pendulum Mountains, which lie half a year's journey to the east. If the lawless lands are an island, then they are larger than any in Wefravain. They are sometimes called the Godless Lands by the cult of the priestess, because wyverns have not been able to penetrate the interior. Gwaine, the truth about wyverns.
Later, when Thessalin had sat down to sing, and Gerard had been introduced to the Magister, after he'd eaten, after he'd been sitting alone, sipping a local wine, Silvio came and sat down at his table. The Admiral did not speak, but proceeded to help himself to most of the small sweets. A moment later, Farrell and several of his captains walked by, talking loudly, like Shelts who'd had too much to drink. Gerard thought they were about to sit down and make cunning, inappropriate remarks about his wife, but Silvio waved them off.
Go play somewhere else. Go on. Grown-ups are talking.
But we're not talking.
Thought Gerard.
We're listening to Thus.
And, as the thought occurred to him, he realized it was true. Silvio listened with absolute attention until she finished the song. He shook his head.
I would hate to make a creature like that cry, Halavar.
Then don't,
said Gerard. He decided that he'd better eat the last of the sweets if he wanted any at all.
Why in the name of all that's holy couldn't you have waited?
Gerard was lost.
On Halavaris, make her your mistress, and then, when you're king, make her your wife. Or just poison your father and be done with it.
Gerard scowled. Silvio waved a hand.
Oh, wait, don't tell me. That wasn't honorable. It was more honorable to drag her into exile and adopt a dangerous profession that will likely leave her a widow. Then she'll be totally without protection in this dangerous world of ours. That was more honorable than keeping your intentions a secret or poisoning your father.
I would have poisoned the island deity, if I'd known how. Did I say that out loud? Perhaps I'm the one who's had too much to drink.
Silvio's eyebrows rose.
So the rumors are true. You did lose a child.
Gerard said nothing, only glared into his glass.
If you make a joke, I will break your jaw, superior officer or not.
Girl or boy?
Asked Silvio.
A girl.
Silvio shook his head.
A shame if she took after her mother at all.
Gerard tried to decide whether this had actually been a joke, and if so, whether it was worth breaking all codes of conduct over.
Wyverns can be killed. I won't advise it, though. The gods hold long grudges.
Gerard glanced at him.
I thought they were invincible and immortal. Thess thinks so too, and she's studied on Mance.
Silvio shrugged.
They may be immortal in the sense that they don't sicken or age, but I know they can be killed. We've found the pelts in Resistance hideouts.
Gerard was fascinated.
You found wyvern pelts? Well, that would be a sight.
Wyverns came in as many shades as jungle butterflies, but they were all lustrous.
Yes. The priestess made us burn them. They were splendid, though.
Gerard laughed.
Wouldn't let you make a hat, eh?
Not even one. Now, tell me about your supposed meeting with the infamous Gwaine. I've chased him on and off for years and never laid eyes on him, but dumb luck seems to be your strong point, so maybe you really did see him.
Gerard told Silvio about the tea house and his conversation with the Schelt who called himself Flag. Silvio interrupted when he got to the book and Flag's explanation of it.
Impossible. The phonetic is not a recognized form of writing in any court in Weffervane. No merchant vessel would dare keep records in it. If they found themselves in a legal dispute, those records would be useless.
Do you read the phonetic?
Asked Gerard, before he realized that he might be asking something insulting. Silvio glared at him.
Of course I read it. They use it all over Slag for unofficial purposes. And if you'd like to learn, I have a couple of books on the subject. Although,
he smiled sweetly.
I doubt you'll be around long enough.
Gerard decided to ignore that.
He must have taught himself Grishnard characters as an adult, or at least a teenager.
It was no mean accomplishment. He almost said so, but decided Silvio would probably throw the compliment back in his teeth. Instead, he finished his story about the tea house. When he got to the part where he'd asked the Schelt's name, Silvio laughed.
Flag. Oh, that's cute.
What does it mean?
You should ask Thessalon. She'll know if she's the professional I take her for.
What does it mean?
Flag is a mythological hero from the very old ballads. His stories are somewhat controversial. The originals call Flag a servant of the Firebird who fought wizards and shapeshifters, but they also mention him killing wyverns.
Gerard sat back.
And Defiance is definitely not a merchant vessel. I'd bet a heap of speckled cowries it's a pirate ship.
He shook his head.
How did he get away?
He walked out of the tea house. I couldn't think of a good reason to detain him.
Silvio stared at Gerard.
He walked out? You just let him walk away?
I didn't know who he was. I had just a general suspicion and...
Silvio groaned.
What was the priestess thinking? She's put a lamb in charge of the police. Holivar, you don't need a good reason to detain anyone. You serve an organization renowned for arresting Schelts without a good reason. Next time you get the pricklies in your tail or twinges from whatever passes for thought inside your head, take the Schelts responsible into custody. If you don't have the stomach to question him, I will.
That's exactly what I'm afraid of. What did you do with the guard in the warehouse?
Silvio shrugged.
Took him inside, broke a few fingers. He didn't know anything. I think he really was just hired to patrol.
And afterward?
Killed him, of course.
Silvio watched Gerard's expression.
I know you think I'm just bloody-minded, but I've been doing this a long time. Acts of mercy have a way of coming back to haunt you. If you question a Schelt, frighten him, and hurt him, and then let him go, he will not thank you for your mercy. He will hold a grudge. His family and friends will hold a grudge, and they'll have a name and a face to go with it. If you kill the Schelt, and you do a good job of it, his family and friends may never even find the body, and they can never be certain what happened.
He sipped his drink morosely.
There were a few Schelts on CERN who should have never let me go. They regretted it very much in the end.
Was the Magister one of them?
Gerard knew he was treading on dangerous ground, but he was curious. The Magister had seemed as nervous as a cat in a cage when Gerard met him. His hands fluttered like frightened birds, and he kept bowing and simpering. Silvio laughed.
No, but I put him where he is, and I could take him away. He knows he's here, not because I like him, but because I hate him less than any of the others qualified for the job.
So that's it.
Gerard wondered whether the fear in Ocelon Town had been fear of the Sea Watch in general, or of Silvio in particular.
I left CERN a mess, but then CERN left me a mess.
He spoke lightly, but Gerard detected an undercurrent of pure rage.
I would set fire to the entire island if I thought I could get away with it. Gods, I hate this place.
Gerard decided he'd better change the subject. Silvio was suddenly drinking much too fast, and the little Ocelon servants kept refilling their glasses. Silvio spoke again before Gerard could think of anything to say.
Do not think that just because I'm talking to you, you're safe, Holivar. You should not. Trust me, you really shouldn't.
Gerard watched Thessaline retune her harp for a new song.
You keep saying that.
Silvio shook his head.
Yes, I must like you. I've given you more than fair warning.
Gerard surprised himself by saying,
You didn't give me much warning the first 2 times you tried to kill me.
Half-hearted experiments, poking a rat in a cage to see how hard it bites. But when I decide to break its back, I won't just poke.
Your own officers are nothing exceptional, because you don't trust anyone who's as smart as you are.
Of course they're not. They're obedient, moderately intelligent, unambitious, and ruthless. Exactly the traits desirable in an officer.
And good in bed?
Asked Gerard, and then he knew it was time to put down his glass. Silvio, however, took the insolence in stride.
Well, it never hurts,
he said with a smirk.
But it's not a prerequisite. Just look at Arundel.
He shuddered.
You, on the other hand, are none of these things. Well, the first things, anyway. I'd have to ask Thessaline whether you're anything other than pretty.
I suppose I earned that. My point is, for all you keep sniping at me, I'm better than what you've got to work with. The priestess was right. We could eradicate the resistance if we worked together.
Silvio rolled his eyes.
Ugh, Holivar. The resistance is something to be controlled, not eradicated. As long as we make fawn pies on Wefrevane, there will be fawns, and some other shelts too, who object. The only way to eradicate the resistance is to kill every single fawn in the islands. We won't do that, so we'll keep controlling them.
But you're not controlling them. They're getting better, more organized, more dangerous. The average lifespan for a captain of the police in the past 10 years is less than a year.
Noticed that, have you?
Unless you're killing them off, I'd say the resistance has become very efficient.
Silvio spread his hands.
Not me. The police are land-based, which means they have potential to come in contact with a lot more hidden dangers. Still, I've suspected for some time that there's a spy somewhere in their organization. Could be one of your wardens on the ship. That's one reason I haven't encouraged their participation.
Gerard thought about that.
And someone searched my office.
Silvio grinned.
I bet you thought it was just to slight you. But that was only an added bonus. I've treated everything and everyone from the police just as suspicious for years. I suspect it's kept me alive.
You treat everyone as suspicious anyway,
said Gerard, deciding he'd been reckless already this evening, and he might as well speak freely.
It sounds to me like the Resistance's attack on the police was even more effective than I thought. It's kept the Watch and the police isolated.
Silvio shrugged.
Could be. You obviously understand the situation so well, after examining it for an 8th watch.
Gerard sighed.
Talking to you is like trying to climb a hill with someone on the top throwing rocks.
Before Silvio could respond, he continued,
Those grape presses.
Ah, yes, the grape presses. You were right, they'd been modified. The block that does the pressing has been made to hold some kind of tray or panel. It didn't look like anything that could be called a weapon. I think the Resistance were probably just using the warehouse as a meeting place. I've already asked our dear Magister to detain the owner. His shelts are searching, but I doubt they'll find anything.
Gerard was about to ask if they knew the name of this person, when he looked up to see Thessaline coming towards them, walking carefully with her hands out as she threaded between the tables. Gerard jumped up to help her, but she'd already navigated most of the distance.
I want to speak to the Admiral. I thought I heard him over here.
Gerard would have liked to tell her she was mistaken, but Silvio piped up.
Keen ears, a sense of humor, and a voice like a goddess. The lady has it all.
All except for sight,
said Thessalim with a smile.
Sight is overrated. Any fool can have it, and often does. What may I do for you?
I'd like to sail back to Lecklock, aboard the Fang, if that's all right.
Gerard shook his head.
Not a good idea, Thess.
Oh, but she asked me, not you,
said Silvio, eyes dancing.
And I would be happy, more than happy, to have you aboard, Thessalin. I'll even refrain from trying to drown Holivar for the duration.
Thessalin hesitated, and then seemed to decide that this was a joke.
How very generous of you.
In fact, Silvio's threats were becoming more difficult to distinguish from his jokes, and Gerard thought that was a good sign.
I know. I am willing to pay a high price for your company.
Gerard cut in.
I'd like to return to that warehouse this evening and take one of those presses back to Lecklock for further inspection. Would you loan me a few shelts to carry it?
Silvio stood up, stretching like a cat.
I am beset with requests from Holivars. A grape press. Why not? We have more useless things aboard ship. Yourself, for instance.
I would not be useless if you'd let me do anything.
Silvio tutted.
Don't lose your temper in front of the lady, Captain. As it happens, you will be useful this evening. I'll give you your grape press if you take me back to that tea house. I promise to try very hard not to light anything on fire.
You have been listening to The Guild of the Cowry Catchers by Abigail Hilton. Copyright Abigail Hilton. Cowry Catchers is an illustrated podcast. Artwork for this episode was created by Greensprite. To view these illustrations, and to learn more about this world and its author, visit the website at www.cowrycatchers.com. This podcast included the vocal talents of
Nathan Lowell
as Gerard, Kimmy Alexander as Thessalin,
Norm Sherman
as Silvio,
Chris Lester
as Gwaine,
Hughes Hilton,
as Marlowe,
Big Anklevich,
as a messenger. Sound effects for this podcast were generously provided by SoundSnap and the Free Sound Project. The intro music for this podcast was Grace by Beth Quist. The outro music is Moonlight Flowers by Amoeba, both licensed with permission from Magnatune.net. This episode also included music by Diana Rowan from Magnatune.net, Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com, and Jamie Saber from Magnatune.net. All music was licensed with permission. This is a standard copyright now. This podcast is provided for your personal enjoyment only. You can download and archive the episodes for your personal use. You may not re-upload, mirror, or publicly redistribute the audio files, nor can you alter, remix, or create derivative works.
A question
And I'm back. This is 2025 Abby, here to talk to you about the episode. So as I have said previously, I feel like this is where the story really gets interesting. Several things are happening here. Thess misbehaves a little bit. She does something at odds with what Gerard wants her to do, and in my opinion, that suddenly makes their dynamic more interesting. Because people who get along all the time are not interesting, and people who never get along are also not interesting. And so you have Thess and Gerard getting along a tiny bit less well, and you have Silvio and Gerard getting along a little bit for the first time. So you've got those crunchy dynamics going on, and then also we meet Gwaine, who is certainly an interesting monkey wrench in this. And one of the products of audio storytelling that is different than text is you get some different aha moments. So obviously in this book, I have incorporated the technique or the conceit by which you deliver little nuggets of information about the world in these little chapter quotes at the beginning. So Gwaine is obviously an author. He's written several books, and we get his little chapter quote nuggets at the beginning of every chapter, which one of the ones in here, I don't remember writing this. I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote this, but Gwaine confidently asserts that anyone can be taught to read in a day with phonetic characters. We will just say that is his opinion, not mine. Not everything Gwaine says can be trusted. He does believe some things that are not true. So that adds a little bit of extra, unreliable narrator element to some of these chapter quotes. But it gives you little bits of information about the world. But in terms of audio storytelling, because you have had his voice delivering all of these chapter quotes, when he shows up in the story in disguise, that's an aha moment that doesn't exist in the text. If you were just reading this, you would not be certain, until the characters start to figure it out, who this is. But if you recognize his voice, which I feel like his voice is fairly distinct. I tried really hard, but I picked voice actors for this to pick people who had distinctive voices that didn't sound too much like each other. I feel like his voice is fairly distinct. Again, Chris is now Kristen. Gwaine's pronouns are he, him. Kristen's pronouns are she, her. But like a Shakespearean actor, Kristen played a gentleman in this. And Gwaine is a gentleman. I think it's fair to say Gwaine is a gentleman. So anyway, that is an aha moment that I can deliver in an audio narrative that was a complete accident because I did not write the story with audio in mind or specifically with full cast. Because also, you wouldn't necessarily get this if we were doing a solo read either. So this is the kind of aha moment that is only possible with full cast. I will say that Rish Outfield, who does a lot of my solo read books, has such a flexible voice and does such distinct voices for many of my characters that he might actually be able to pull that off as a recognizable, aha moment. But usually if you're doing a solo read, that kind of reveal is going to happen in the same way that it would in text. But in a full cast production, you can get these kinds of effects. I was also going to comment on the phonetic versus the pictographic characters. I spent a year teaching English in Taiwan when I was 20 and 21, and that was formative for me because it was a completely different culture, and one of the ways in which it was different is that it had a written language that was not phonetic, and that had all kinds of interesting consequences and knock-on effects that, I was young, I was sheltered, I just had never thought about these kinds of things before. So, for instance, two people who spoke such different dialects of Chinese that they couldn't communicate with each other in spoken words, they could communicate through a pictographic text that they shared, because it was not phonetic. So there are some strengths that you wouldn't think of a pictographic text that is not phonetic. People whose words don't sound the same at all, if they both know that kind of language, can actually write to each other and communicate just fine. So there are some things that it can do that a phonetic written alphabet cannot do. But of course, it is a challenge to learn and requires a lot more memorization. It's just more complicated in certain ways. There's a higher bar to entry there. There is, in Mandarin that I was learning while I was there is a phonetic alphabet, and you can use it to put beside a word that people don't know so they can sound it out. But it's not how books and stuff are generally written. I have been fortunate in that my most popular series, The Knight and the Necromancer, published under A.H. Lee, those books have had not one, but two Chinese translations, which just makes me happy because it's probably the language that I have the most emotional attachment to because I spent time around people that spoke Mandarin and I learned some Mandarin. I've been back to Taiwan a couple of times since then. These were small publishers who just approached me unprompted, like I was not seeking to sell translation rights, but two different small presses, more than a year apart. The first one was called D2D Press, and they wanted rights to translate the books into modified Chinese characters, so the kind of characters they use in mainland China after the Cultural Revolution and all that stuff. They had this modified, simplified Chinese characters, but again, they're not phonetic. And it is more challenging to translate a fantasy novel into Chinese than other kinds of novels because they have to actually create my made-up words, usually by putting like existing characters together to create a made-up word. You can't just spell it out, or I guess you could put phonetic characters beside it to spell it out, but there's challenges there, and it requires creativity on the part of the translator. My understanding is it is more of a challenge to translate a fantasy novel than other kinds of novels. But anyway, they approached me, and then I think it was a year and a half later, another one called Reeve Books approached me for a traditional Chinese translation. And these are completely separate rights. The simplified characters and the traditional characters are different enough that people who can read the traditional, which are more elaborate, can usually read the simplified, but the people who can read the simplified, who learned on the simplified, cannot necessarily read the traditional. Anyway, these are two completely different small presses that approached me separately, more than a year apart, about Chinese translations for those books, which, again, The Knight and the Necromancer is certainly my best-selling series, and it is published under A.H. Lee. It is a enemies to lovers romance in a very high fantasy, D&D, high politics, high stakes, a classic fantasy setting with a gay romance going on. And I would say that the books have a romance structure, but I make sure to try to follow the rules of the epic fantasy structure as well. So it is romance first, which I think is an important decision when you're writing a book that has two genres with very different conventions coming together in the same story. So it is romance first, but it has a very strong sword and sorcery setting and element. I would say for my Abigail Hilton books, including The Guild of the Cowry Catchers, these books are fantasy first. So there is romance. There are some strong romance subplots. Sometimes they come to the foreground and get the focus of the story. But overall, if the rules of epic fantasy come in conflict with the rules of romance, epic fantasy rules are going to win when I'm writing an Abigail Hilton book. Whereas if I'm writing an A.H. Lee book, if those two things come into conflict, the rules of the romance genre are going to win. And I think that there's lots of little ways those things can come into conflict, but the most obvious way they come into conflict is that romances are required to have a happy ending. And I would also say that major character death is pretty close to off the table in a romance structured novel, whereas in fantasy novels, obviously major character death is very much on the table, and you are not guaranteed a happily ever after. I think that most fantasy readers, unless they know that they're reading grimdark, they are going to be dissatisfied if you give them a real downer ending. And I don't write complete downer endings. But I do sometimes write bittersweet endings, and I absolutely do not guarantee that every character will make it to the end of the story. And so these are genre conventions that are kind of assumed of people who read a lot in those genres, and these things can come into conflict if you're writing a book that is both of these genres. I was going to say one more thing about Reeve Books. They publish several authors that I like in Chinese, and one of them is KJ Charles. So when I saw that, I was excited to be to have a translator work on my books that might have also worked on her books. But it takes a while to do those things, and I think the Reeve deal was less than a year ago. So even the first one is not out yet from Reeve, but D2D Press has released the first one, and I want to say they've got the second one out at this point, but I haven't looked in a while at their website. They're marketing to a Chinese audience, and they know how to market to that audience. So the places where they're selling the books are not familiar to me. I have no idea how to market to a Chinese audience. So that was also why I didn't say, oh, I'll do that translation myself and sell it myself, and I don't really want to let you keep most of the money. Because I have no idea how to sell those books. If someone approached me about a German deal, I would have to look at it more closely, because I feel like German is a language that a lot of times the things that sell well in English also sell well in German, and you can certainly get to those readers through Amazon. So I feel like I would have to decide whether I would prefer to finance a translation myself and sell it myself versus license it to a publisher. That would be a harder decision. But it wasn't a hard decision for Chinese, because I don't think a Chinese translation would exist if these publishers hadn't approached me. I don't think I know enough about selling it to, to pay thousands of dollars to get the translation. But I was really excited about its existence because, again, that's a language that I speak some of and that I have lived, in that language before, and it influenced some of my books. So specifically, coming all the way back around to the story you just listened to, some of the stuff about the phonetic and the ways in which a pictographic text might serve as a bar to entry for reading, that was definitely heavily influenced by the time that I spent in Asia. And again, Gwen's confident assertion that anyone can learn a phonetic alphabet in a day is a crazy thing to say. But, Gwen says some crazy things, so we'll just say that was his opinion. There's one scene in here that if you read the text or you read the text, you're going to find different. And that is the scene where Tess meets Silvio, which is a scene that I really like and a scene that I've got some great artwork of. But she touches his face to, quote, see him. And several blind listeners approached me about this later and were like, this is not a thing. This is a stereotype because of Helen Keller. Helen Keller was both deaf and blind. This is not something that blind people normally do, and it annoys us that people think we do. And so I apologized, and I apologize. I rewrote that scene in the text version of the book. When I released that final book in the series, I went back and did a light edit on all the previous books, even the ones that have been published for years, and I altered that scene. But again, the full cast version, it is what it is. I can't go back in and change stuff. The cast is older. Some of them don't even sound exactly the same. They can't reconstruct the same recording environments. Some of them are dead. I don't have the layered files for all of this. So, I can't put that baby bird back in the egg. But the one that I could fix, I did. So I altered that scene a little bit. And it's been long enough now. That was back in 2020, 2021. I can't remember exactly the way I altered it. I may have still had her touch his face or his earrings just because I think that's a charming scene, but not for the same reasons. Not because she's like seeing him. I think I mentioned before that the Dune Steef intro, those guys, both Big and Rish, are still writing stories, still recording audio. Both of them now have their own Patreons, and you can follow them individually. They are guests on each other's shows pretty often. And Rish recorded a lot of books for me. He is certainly the voice of Hunter's Unlucky and the voice of some future books in the series that you were listening to, the Pirates of Wefervain series. His versions of some of these voice actors' voices are pretty great. We'll get to that eventually. He's a talented mimic, so they do sound like themselves. They don't sound exactly like themselves, but when he does his version of like Norm is recognizable. Anyway, the character dynamics continue to get more interesting and more crunchy from this point, and I will see you in the next episode. This is Abigail Hilton, and you have been listening to the Pirates of Wefervain saga. Join me on Patreon for early episodes, long-form interviews, forum access, personal updates, and lots of artwork, including maps and species charts. That's patreon.com/Abigail Hilton. If you want the whole story now with no interruptions and some remastering of the early books for sound quality, you can find the entire series at shop.abigailhilton.com, along with all my other novels. The audiobooks are delivered by BookFunnel. Background music was Hidden Sky by Jamie Sieber, licensed from Magnatune.net circa 2014. The Guild of the Cowry Catchers podcast is an audio adaptation of the Pirates of Wefervain saga, written and produced by Abigail Hilton. Original production copyright 2010. All rights are reserved to the author.